Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. Your hosts today are Scott Barker and Jesse Mayshark, the founders of CompassKnox.com. You can find their daily in-depth coverage and subscribe at CompassKnox.com. The Compass Point podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Almost an Agreement. Almost an Agreement is a layman's attempt to get a handle on the workings in government and politics that we deal with every day. Check them out at almostanagreement.com or subscribe for free on your favorite podcast provider. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And now, here are your hosts, Scott and Jesse from CompassKnox.com.
Hello and welcome back again to Compass Points, the weekly podcast where we talk about Knoxville news, government, politics, anything else that gets our attention. I'm Jesse Mayshark, co-founder and co-publisher of Compass, which you can find at CompassKnox.com. I am joined, as always, by Scott Barker, also co-founder and co-publisher of Compass, and especially for those of you who happen to be watching this on the YouTube channel, you will note that we are also joined by the floating head of Rusty Odom, the one and only. How are you doing, Rusty?
I'm doing great. It's great to be here in person, and I did not know I shouldn't have worn a green shirt.
It's all right. I like the effect. We're going to be talking to Rusty in a few minutes here about an announcement that we made this week. Scott, how are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. The new year has started, and so we're, cautiously optimistic, as they like to say, about 2023. How about you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I will say as a reporter, it's nice to have everybody back at work. I know you and I, of course, kind of enjoyed the lull over the holidays, but, we don't take a break from our publication schedule. Compass is published every weekday, week in and week out. And during those couple of weeks over Christmas and New Year's every year, we do our year in review, we do our kind of look ahead at the next year, but the reality is there's almost nothing going on.
Yeah, there's no news.
Yeah, so and we're trying to fill that daily email we send out, and sometimes we're kind of scraping for anything that seems interesting and connected to what we do. So it's kind of nice to have people back in the office, returning our phone calls.
Making news.
That's right. Get back to work and make us some news, y'all. We did have a little bit of news, at least this first week of the year, which we're going to talk about a few things. We had some news about crime statistics from 2022, which we will talk about. An announcement and some discussion about the upcoming city elections. As we've talked about, we're into a new year now. In these off years, the odd years, that's when the city of Knoxville has their races, and so people are starting to gear up for those. Also, a little bit of political news on the Republican Party front, which we will talk about. The city of Knoxville is going to be actually starting to move into their new public safety complex. But before we get to all of that, this past Monday, we had a sort of entertaining article come out in Politico, which is the national online political publication that a lot of people are probably familiar with. It mostly focuses on Washington, D.C., and Congress and the president and so forth. And they had a whole feature this past Monday on whom?
Our own Congressman Tim Burchett.
Tim Burchett.
The class clown of Congress, as they called him.
That's what they said. They also called him the House GOP's new king of comedy.
Yes.
King of comedy and class clown both. And this was really just basically a pretty friendly feature for Burchett. It talked about the fact that he is a bit of a cut-up, and those of us, of course, who have known Burchett and covered him when I worked at the city-county building, I worked for the city, and he was the county mayor, and so we had a lot of relations between our two administrations. We know that Tim can be a bit of a quirky guy.
Yeah, he can be.
And apparently that reputation has now followed him into the halls of Congress.
Right.
Of course, he's well known for, among other things, wearing his reliable Carhartt jacket everywhere he goes.
It's his
The only
trademark.
member... Well, you know what was funny? John Fetterman, the senator just elected from Pennsylvania, who kind of has cultivated this like man of the people, working man persona. He wears a Carhartt jacket, and the New York Times ran a story about him taking office with the headline something like "Fetterman brings Carhartt to the Capitol." And Burchett made a point of retweeting the story and saying, "Excuse me, I've been wearing a Carhartt here for 4 years," which is true, he has. But one point that the story made is that Burchett's sense of humor has actually served him well there in Congress. It can make him seem a little goofy. In the past, he's made kind of a point of like talking about Bigfoot, being a Bigfoot enthusiast. He is a big proponent of the federal government releasing more information about anything they know about unidentified flying objects, and that's something that I think he's actually very serious about. I don't really think that's a joking matter to him. It's something where he feels like there's information out there and we need to get it out. But he also is very good at just kind of disarming people. If you meet him in public, he's always out there fist bumping everybody. Yeah. And it talked about the fact that as a relatively junior member of what has been the minority, of course now Republicans are a majority in Congress. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But it has helped him make friends among his own caucus, but also across the aisle with people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and other Democrats. So I guess... for those of us who have known him for a while, this is not exactly surprising that this is his persona, right?
Yeah, he's he's an affable guy. He's kind of fun. He doesn't take himself too seriously, and will make a lot of situations. He's very quick to point out whenever he talks about this, though, is just because I'm friends with AOC doesn't mean I'm going to vote with her on anything. He's real quick on that, But in some ways it's a little bit of a throwback to the days when congressmen on opposite parties would be friendly and would socialize with each other and then get on the floor and duke it out. But and those days are pretty much gone. He has said when I've talked to him before that he's been warned not to get on elevators with Democrats, and he gets questioned when he's chatting up somebody from the Democratic Party, and he thinks that's silly, and I think a lot of people probably do as well. But it is kind of, that part of it is kind of a throwback. But he's definitely not the button down, member of Congress that we're most accustomed to seeing.
Yeah, well, and one thing he said to Politico was that he feels like his constituents in East Tennessee know who he is, they're comfortable with him. And I think that this is, on the one hand, this is a real political strength of his, and it always has been, that he projects, like you say, an affability. He's a very good retail politician. Like if you watch him work a room at any event, he'll walk in. He almost always knows like everybody in the room if it's here in Knoxville, Knox County. If he doesn't know somebody, he'll make a point of going up and introducing himself. Again doing the fist bumps and everything, and it is a real political strength. But I think the reason it works for him is that it feels very natural. I mean, I think he's very comfortable doing that. There are things he is not as comfortable doing. He has never been somebody who's going to sit there in a 2.5 hour detailed wonky policy session and want to dig down into the footnotes in paragraph 14. Like that's not really who he is. But that kind of like easy breezy, friendly, how you doing, brother?
Yeah.
I think that it works for him politically because it's very natural to him. You see other people get into politics who that doesn't come easily to, and have to really kind of work at it. And you can always kind of see the effort.
Yeah. They'll try to play the good old boy if they're in a district that's more rural or something like that, and it obviously is false. And,
Right.
And people pick up on that.
Yeah,
And
I mean, kind of like, no disrespect to our former senator, but no matter how many times Lamar Alexander wore those plaid shirts, he was never like totally convincing as just a good old boy,
Yeah.
because that wasn't really who he was, And I think that Tim Burchett has found a way to leverage, aspects of his kind of natural personality into real political strengths. Also just wanted to say a word about him this week because, of course, we've all been watching the ongoing drama in the House of Representatives as they have struggled and failed so far to elect a Speaker of the House. We are taping this at 1 p.m. on Friday, and I believe they're in the 12th vote right now. It looks like that's not going to work. Maybe they'll get one by the end of the day. By the time this airs on Sunday, they might have elected Kevin McCarthy. They might have elected just about anybody Speaker. But Burchett, interestingly, who kind of styles himself as not being part of the system, not being part of the establishment, but he has been part of the strong Republican majority supporting Kevin McCarthy, who really is kind of the establishment candidate in this speaker's race. And, he's just kind of said point blank that he promised McCarthy his support. He feels like McCarthy was their leader when they won the majority in this past election, and therefore he deserves to be the speaker. And I guess we'll just kind of see what shakes out of all of that.
Yeah, he likes to I think he likes to put himself out as being kind of not in the establishment, but I think that's more of his personality than anything else. It's not in the establishment. He is he is a reliable vote for the Republican caucus in the House. He doesn't go out and do anything that the majority of the caucus isn't doing. So
right. He's not a member of the Freedom Caucus. He's friendly with a lot of people who are in the Freedom Caucus, but that's the group that a lot of members of the Freedom Caucus have been the ones kind of voting against McCarthy, and he's always kind of kept a friendly distance, I guess.
Right.
From them.
Yeah, and it's not to say he's not. He's a firm conservative Republican, but he's within the when he votes. We're not talking about his personality. We're not talking about his willingness to get on an elevator with a Democrat. When you talk about the votes, he's a reliable conservative Republican.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is our congressional update on our king of comedy, class clown, Tim Burchett. Moving on to maybe less entertaining topics. What's going on with the city's plans at the public safety complex there in North Knoxville?
The city's public safety complex, $70 million renovation / new construction at the former St. Mary's site in North Knoxville is getting ready to open. It's going to house the police department, the fire department, administrative offices, the city court, backup E911 center, Knox County Emergency Management, some other offices, and they're going to be moving in phases over the next few months. The fire department, administrative offices, they will be the first ones to move in. That will be later this month, and they are the interior is just about done. Carpets are down, the walls are painted, they're putting in furniture, that sort of thing now. They are still going to be doing the facade repair work that we talked about before, where that brick that was improperly installed in the 1970s, they discovered that it's dangerous. It's a dangerous thing, and they're taking that brick off and putting a new facade on. But they're still going to be able to move in while they're doing that exterior work, and they'll at some point this spring they'll be having a community event where they'll invite people there. I don't know how many, how detailed of a tour people will get, but be able to see it, and also see a spot on the north side of the campus where the old historic original hospital building still stands, because they saved it They're hoping that they'll be able to lease that or to get a private developer to come in and rehab that building, perhaps build some other. They're hoping housing for that spot.
Yeah, there's a fair amount of open space up there.
There's a lot of open space up there, and there's plenty of room to put in some kind of housing complex up there, and where the old hospital building stands, as well as some green space. They're wanting to add some green space for the Oakwood Lincoln Park neighborhood. So.
Well, as a resident of Oakwood Lincoln Park, I'm watching it all with great interest.
Yeah, I live near there too, and drive by there quite often, and it's interesting to see how they're coming along.
It's coming along.
Like I said, they're still working on the brickwork on the exterior of one of the buildings, so it still looks like a construction zone, but it is almost ready to move in.
All right, and of course, once the police department moves over there from their current site, that will free up that space on Howard Baker Drive there. And of course, that has been designated for a new science museum, which we haven't heard a lot about recently. What does the city say about that project?
They say it's still in the works. That the Jim Clayton, the businessman and philanthropist, his foundation owns it now, and they're the ones who are going to build the science museum. They're still planning to do that. The city officials met with them just recently. He knows when they're moving out. I think he's going to be waiting on that before he does anything. The pandemic delayed a lot of the design work on it because they didn't know how. Especially in the early days of the pandemic, didn't know how that might change the way we view interior spaces, and how they would have to design exhibits and things like that. So they put that on hold. They kind of waited to see how it's going to play out, and they haven't made an announcement of when they're going to, start moving dirt or anything like that. But the police department should be fully moved into the new public safety complex by April. So that should be after that. Hopefully there'll be an announcement about what they're going to be doing
sometime this year.
Even
in the first half of this year, maybe.
One would think.
Right. All right. Well, we will see. All right. A little bit of interesting news out of the County Republican Party this week. County Commissioner Kyle Ward, who a few months ago we talked about, had said he was going to run for chair of the Knox County Republican Party next month when they have their regular organizational meeting. He decided not to, and he said that not only is he not going to run for chair of the Republican Party, he is also not going to seek re-election to his county commission seat in the 4th District, where he was elected just 2 years ago in 2020. He's going to serve out his term. He and his wife just had a baby. Congratulations. Yeah. And he said he really wants to, and he's a business owner as well. He has a waste collection business. He said he really just wants to focus on being a dad, that he never had a dream of being a lifelong politician or anything. And so that kind of opens up that he had been urged to run for it by County Mayor Glenn Jacobs and Congressman Burchett, who are the two most prominent, sort of powerful Republicans here in Knox County. And anybody running for that seat would do well to have their support for sure. Of course, Daniel Herrera, the current chair, has said who has been sort of controversial, kind of divisive within the party. He is not running for another term there, so it's an open seat. And probably there will be several people put their names forward. We did hear from one this week.
Yeah, in fact, it was the same day that that Ward made his announcement. Keith Line, who's a former police officer, retired police officer, served 29 years at KPD and a year at the sheriff's office. And he was a two-time president of the Fraternal Order of Police local here in Knoxville. Decided he was going to run. He announced his intention to be to run for party chair of the Republican Party. And when I talked to him, the day he made the announcement, he said that it was just kind of a coincidence that he came out at the same time Kyle Ward said he was bowing out. He said he was already planning to run. I guess that just eliminates an opponent for him. But he had no idea Kyle was going to be doing that. It was just kind of a coincidence, and he's doing that. One of the interesting things there is that Lyon has also named a treasurer, indicating his intent to run for the mayor of the city of Knoxville against incumbent India Kincannon. So I asked him about that, and he said, well, that still remains to be seen. He's kind of non-committal about actually running. Of course, it's still a long way out there, several months now before they have to have petitions submitted and anything else like that. So there's plenty of time for him to make a decision on that. But I thought it was interesting. So he's got those two options, and he said, he's just going to see how it plays out. The first thing that's coming up is the county Republican Party convention, which is next month.
Yep.
And so that'll be where the next chair is elected, and it'll be interesting to see also if anybody else throws their hat in the ring for that.
Right. Well, and it does, like, if Lyon were elected chair of the County Republican Party, I have to say that makes it seem a little unlikely he would run for mayor.
Yeah.
I can't think of any time that a sitting county chair. Now, it is a nonpartisan race, and so that may or may not violate restrictions against, a chair being able to run for office, but it still seems kind of unlikely that you would do both of those things. Plus, also, honestly, given voting patterns in the city, we have seen, like just 2 years ago, there was this whole explicitly Republican slate running in those nonpartisan races, and they all lost by about 10 points across the board. The city does tend to vote more Democratic, so running for a citywide office while also being a Republican Party officer may not be a great political position to be running from.
Yeah, and the other thing with that that's kind of interesting is, as his, obviously, he was a longtime police officer, obviously well respected by the officers in the county by being elected, president of the local, so he's got all this law enforcement connection and everything else. You think, okay, there are a lot of people who kind of look to the FOP's endorsements and things like that. They look to see the candidates who support law enforcement, who support firefighters, and they tend to, and that's a big voting bloc. However, you also, on the other hand, you've got, Mayor Kincannon, who just pushed through, big raises for police officers and firefighters, and also it's kind of like, well, who's going to get the
very much with the support of the FOP and the rank and file.
Absolutely, they the FOP, the Firefighters Association, all it has meant more money in their pockets. So that would be an interesting dynamic should he decide to run.
Right. Well, and so speaking of city politics, we had at least one candidate did official, somebody who we talked about before is running, but made it official this week, which was?
Debbie Helsley. She was she's a former union official who ran as a Democrat against Glenn Jacobs and ran a pretty solid race, got 45% of the vote. And
countywide, yeah.
Countywide, and that's so she did very well there. She is going to be running for an at-large seat, the one that's currently held by Janet Testerman. Testerman hasn't announced whether she's running for re-election or not, but you kind of assume she probably will be. I'm kind of running on the assumption until they announce that they're all coy about it when you ask them about it, but that the incumbents are going to run for re-election.
You assume the incumbents are running until they say they're not.
And
but Testerman is a Republican, as we know from her race last year, running for the state legislature, and she lost the Republican primary in the 18th district to Elaine Dafus. But in the course of that campaign, she took some fairly conservative. She and Davis got into a bit of a fight over who was the real conservative. And so then you think about if Testerman then turns back to run for re-election in the city, which leans more Democratic, all of those claims that she made last year to being the real conservative, especially running against somebody like Helsley, who is a Democrat and
makes no bones about being
old school liberal labor Democrat, that may not be to Testerman's advantage in the city. I feel like it puts her in a bit of a bind if she's going to run for re-election.
Well, I think it's going to make that one a race to watch very closely, because it will be one of the most contested races. A lot of times when you run as an incumbent, you've got an inherent advantage. First of all, people have already elected you once. As long as you haven't really messed up, you're off to a good start. So it's not to say that a challenger can't beat an incumbent, but it certainly Helsley will be a formidable challenge for Testerman, and it'll be one that you might even say from the get-go it's a toss-up.
And then, of course, in the District A at-large seat, Lynn Fugit has announced she's the only incumbent who has said for sure that she's running for re-election, and she's going to face Cameron Brooks, which is an interesting race too, because Fugit again is a Republican. She hasn't taken necessarily the kind of explicitly conservative stances that Testerman did when she ran last year, but she is a Republican. Brooks is a Democrat, former chair of the county Democratic Party. And interestingly to me, he is also emphasizing his labor background, that he was an organizer with United Campus Workers. And so between him and Helsley now, we're going to have two really explicitly pro-labor candidates running, which is something we haven't seen much in recent years. Now, I mean, my former boss, former Mayor Madeline Rojero, had a labor background also. But kind of since her, we haven't had anybody running in these city races. There certainly have been candidates who have been endorsed by local labor groups, but we haven't had anybody running with really explicit labor backgrounds. And it'll be interesting to see, whether that message has more resonance this year, particularly coming off of a lot of talk about places like Starbucks and Amazon organizing. There's a little more energy in the labor movement right now, at least rhetorically, than there has been in quite a while. And I just thought it was interesting that, Helsley, you expect to emphasize that because that was really, she was a union official. But Brooks is also really emphasizing that part of his background, which I think kind of shows that people perceive that there's some political advantage there, again, specifically within the city of Knoxville.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things about that race, too, is that while Fugit is a Republican, she also is the council member who has pushed through, the most progressive piece of legislation that is originated from council, and that was the Affordable Housing Fund, and the requirement that the city, legal requirement now that the city spend at least $5 million a year over the next 9 years now, but over a 10-year period on affordable housing, and she was the driving force behind getting that through with the administration and housing advocates. So there's whereas if you look at it from the pro-labor, pro-democrat point of view, Janet Testerman might have vulnerabilities there, but that is not a vulnerability that Fugit has.
Yep. Well, interesting races coming up. Of course, we will have many months to watch these play out. And then we did have a bit of non-political, real news drop right at the end of the week. Knoxville Police Department came out with their annual crime report, I guess preliminary data, because it still has to be certified and so forth. But of course, we've been talking the last few years about this surge in gun violence that we've seen. So what happened in 2022?
Yeah, in 2022, the the number of murders dropped 15%. Last year was at a high of 41, and it dropped to 35 last year. Now, we reported in the middle of the year that we did kind of an update, mid-year update, and the trend was at that time that it was going lower, and it indeed played out, because you never know. You're one mass shooting away from breaking records, and so you never know what's going to happen. So that's good. It's still way above the 10-year average, and still above the numbers that the city was showing before the pandemic. So one of the things is, I talked to the sheriff, talked to the Chief Noel about it. He was saying that, this is a good trend, but we've got to do more. He wants to reduce it a further 10% next year, which would get it down pretty close to the pre-pandemic levels.
Well, it would need to go. We're at 35 this past year, so 10% would get you down to around 31, and the 10-year average is like 25.
Yeah, well, the 10-year average will be a little bit higher next year.
Right. If the 10-year average goes up.
The 10-year average is a moving 10 years. So,
but this is something that we've seen nationwide, especially 2020, 2021. There was this real spike in violent crime and homicides in particular, and shooting deaths in particular, nationwide, not only in cities as it happens, but also in rural areas, kind of across the board. And there are a lot of different theories. There's a lot of speculation about the different causes of that, clearly somewhat connected to the various kinds of disruptions that happened during the pandemic, possibly also connected to the fact that gun sales went up also dramatically during the pandemic, which could be related to all of those, relief payments and so forth that went out. There was a period there where a bunch of people had some extra spending money, and that coincided with a whole bunch of guns being bought sort of across the board in the country. We don't know the connections between all those things, but they've been alarming trends.
Yeah, those are alarming trends. The one thing that when we get back to the murder rates here, cities are just now coming out with these. Chattanooga released theirs. They actually had a 25% reduction in the number of murders between last year and this year, or 2 years ago and last year. And of course, they had a real problem in Chattanooga. It was worse than in Knoxville. So they also have a new police chief, and so their numbers are down there. Another thing that and we tend to focus on homicides, and rightly so. But one of the things that came out of this is that, and this kind of hits you in your neighborhood, even if you don't live in a place where homicides are common. Property crimes are down, and in particular, motor vehicle thefts are down 21%, and breaking and entering and burglary, which is what you think of, why you might buy one of those guns is to protect your home against somebody. They're down. So those property crimes are going down. One of the other things that Chief Noel said, and of course he's only been here 6 months. He's made a lot of changes in the organization and how they do patrols, things like that. He's wanting to get more officers in the street and empower commanders in the streets to deploy officers where they need to go. And he's thinking that the increased presence in neighborhoods, in business corridors, things like that will act as a deterrent to property crimes, because he said that I don't know the data. He said the data shows that if officers are seen in an area and then they leave, even after they're gone, there's kind of a deterrent factor, because apparently people who are thinking about grabbing a stereo out of a car or whatever, are worried about them coming back. I don't know.
Right. If you've seen one of those cruisers in the recent past, it kind of Well,
but those numbers are pretty good. One of the things that wasn't so good is that assaults and aggravated assaults are also up. And aggravated assault is one of those things that is, many aggravated assaults, not all, many are this close to being homicides. And so, you can, somebody uses a weapon to hit you in the head, and they don't kill you, they're going to get charged with aggravated assault. Well, if they hit just a little bit harder or a different spot on your head, you're gone. It's a homicide. So
similarly, if you get shot but it doesn't kill you.
And so, and a lot of those, and a lot of homicides are this way too, is that they're personal disputes that are very difficult to intercede ahead of time. You don't, if there's going to be an aggravated assault, a fight in a bar, you can't really know that ahead of time till it happens. And, you get in a fight in a bar, somebody pulls a gun out, but they pull a gun out, they'll shoot somebody, that happens, you can't, there's nothing you can do to prevent that ahead of time.
Right. And much less if it happens at somebody's home.
Oh, yeah.
It's, All right. Well, I guess we'll just see if the positive trends continue into this year, if the negative trends get better or worse. We'll see how it goes. Okay, well, let's turn aside from all of that weighty political and crime conversation to something a little more fun. And we're going to bring in our guest, Rusty Odom.
Hello.
Founder and publisher of Blank newspaper, which hopefully you are all familiar with. You can find it any number of places around town.
Yes.
And Rusty, before we get to talking about why we have you here today, why don't you just tell us a little bit of background about yourself and about Blank for people who may have seen it but don't really know what it is or who you are.
Sure. So, Rusty Odom. I grew up on the east side of town, like Strawberry Plains area. Goodness, I don't even know where to begin, but I will say that Blank, I'll start here. Blank started in August of 2007. It was originally going to be a sports-oriented paper. I was telling a story to somebody last night about this, and I had kind of remembered all the details. But basically, it was the year when UT football just kind of evaporated. And so we quickly, with Johnny Flanagan was my music editor at the time. His uncle Mike Flanagan worked for the Sentinel for years and years and years.
Started Scott and I both worked with Mike. Great guy.
He was a great guy.
Yeah. Okay. So so he kind of had the bug, and we pretty much immediately switched towards music and entertainment in general. So we ran with that. Just slowly started taking ourselves more seriously over the years. And I guess now we've been at it for 15 years. And goodness, the people that we have writing for Blank I'm very proud of the family we built for sure.
Well, and you've partly benefited to some degree from the fact that nobody else in town is covering this stuff. And of course, my late lamented paper Metropulse disappeared, which used to do a lot of local arts and music coverage. The New Sentinel used to do a lot more than they do now. And you actually have some people who wrote for other publications who are now contributors, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So Wayne Bledsoe came over several years ago now from the Sentinel. I mean, I consider him the godfather of Knoxville music journalism, And then Steve Wildsmith has also been a part of our staff for years. And then I think one of the biggest things that happened to us that gave us a lot of credibility, I don't know that we would have gotten Wayne or Steve if it weren't for Matt Rankin, the editor at Blank. And he is just... he almost takes it too seriously. He goes through so much to make sure that the paper is exactly how it should be, and he just pours over the edits every time. So when he came on board, it really, we really stepped our game up a lot, and that's a credit to him for sure.
And you all publish monthly, right?
We are a monthly paper, yes. So let's see, August this past year was our 15-year anniversary issue. And so we usually print around the second Wednesday of each month.
And people can find it at stores, restaurants, bars.
Yeah, we're from Turkey Creek to Townsend, about 300 or 400 places. And it's all over the place. You'd be surprised where you can find it. And obviously at blanknews.com or just blank.news.
Got it. Well, so the reason we have asked you here today is because we are doing something together.
We
Compass
are.
and Blank.
Yes.
Not necessarily the most obvious partners, but we have a lot of shared interests in Knoxville and seeing good things happen here. And one thing that I think we all have felt the lack of in recent years is a good, easy way for any of us to find out just what's going on in Knoxville. So, starting this coming week, we are launching something we're calling the Knoxville Mix. And so, Rusty, what are we doing with this?
All right, I love it. So, and Jesse, we've talked about this for a long time, you know. So, basically, there's a lot of lists around town where you can find, including in Blank, where you can find, you know, just kind of what's going on. But who knows what, you know, Appalachian Folk Soul Revival is. I mean, that's, you kind of know what it is, but then if there's a band name, especially some of the band names at Pilot Light, like you have no idea what that band is or what to expect in terms of genre or any of that stuff. So we have decided to create a weekly newsletter email, and it will go out, I guess it'll be 8 days, right? It'll be Wednesday to Wednesday?
Wednesday to Wednesday every week.
Yeah, and so what time do you think that'll hit each people's inbox?
Boy, we haven't sent out the first one yet, so I don't know. I was kind of thinking midday-ish, but I don't have a strong opinion about that. Any internet marketers out there who want to give us advice on, you should absolutely send this out at 1:44 p.m. or whatever, just drop us the line at theknoxmix@gmail.com is our email address for this. But yes, it will be going out on Wednesday, and crucially, it is free.
It is 100% free, and it will always be free as far as I know. And then we're also, like, I think we've had some connections, or some people reach out and ask, we would guarantee we will never sell your information or your email. That's nothing, you just don't even.
If you sign up for this email is all you're going to get.
Exactly.
You're not going to start getting hit up by, you know, and we are hopefully going to have advertisers and sponsors on this, because since it's free, we kind of need that in order to make it worth all of our while to do this. But those advertisers and sponsors will be buying space in the newsletter. They are not going to be buying any of your information. And so we have a sign-up form online. What's the best way for people to find that?
Yeah, so you can go to, I guess, blanknews.com right now, or compass.com, right? We have links. Both of us have links.
We actually have not posted a link yet at Compass. We have sent it out to our
I guess that's
subscribers.
True. That's right.
We probably should put one on our website.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, because people do come to the website who aren't subscribers.
That's right.
Then they find out they need to subscribe to get it, and hopefully they subscribe. But but we can put a link on, you know, if we can put a link on the homepage, that might be a good thing.
Yes, we're kind of making this up as we go along.
Yes,
in case you can't tell.
Yes, we are.
But
it's going to be great, though.
We've been talking about it for like a year and a half. We kind of kept having meetings like, yeah, we should do this and whatever. And finally we were like, all right, because, you know, it felt like there were all these different things we had to solve about it. And we finally decided, let's just make it. Let's just put it out there. And we've already gotten really good response.
I've been blown away by the response, both from just people signing up, people that I've just seen out. I had somebody come up to me last night and just thank me for doing it. I was like, wow, you know. So I think the future's really bright for this thing. I think it's going to be really good for the musicians and the artists. And we'll do a lot of non-musical stuff as well, which we can talk about here in a second. But I think it's going to be good for the artists in this town as well as the venues in this town. And so that's kind of the main goal. It's for them. It's for the people. It's a way for us to be proud, more in the know of what's going on in our town, so we could be more proud of our town, I feel like.
Absolutely, and engaged with it.
Absolutely.
And just, even if you're not somebody who goes out a whole lot, it's nice to know what your options are. It's nice to kind of look through something and be like, oh, I could go do that if I wanted to, or if you've got company coming to town or whatever. And so, to be clear, what we're doing here is what we're calling a curated calendar. We're going to kind of sift through everything that's going on and put together a weekly listing of the most interesting, most significant, notable things. And so some weeks it'll be longer than others, depending. It's probably good that we're starting in January when the event calendar is a little lighter, give us some time to kind of get our feet under ourselves. But we're not setting any particular limit on that, on what kinds of things get included. We want it to be as broad as possible. Certainly there will be a lot of music in there, theater, comedy, visual arts and exhibitions, author readings.
Absolutely.
If there's some interesting speaker coming to UT, you know, that could go in there. And so anybody out there who wants to make sure that we know about what you're doing, again, you can send information to that email at theknoxmix@gmail.com.
Yeah, one of the things that you just mentioned that I think is really important is the curation of the information, because as Rusty mentioned, a lot of times there are calendars that you can come to that there's a name of the venue and the name of the performer.
Might be an alphabetical list.
Or whatever, but you really don't get an idea of the flavor of what's going to happen. And so, what we're doing is, instead of listing everything possible you could do, which I don't even know if we can have the people to do that, but take out the highlights. And if you're going to go out and see a show on Tuesday night, here are a couple of the best ones you can go to.
Sure.
Yep.
If you're wanting to see a play, here's what's premiering this week, at the Clarence Brown or wherever. And so, it's one of those things where it's informative, and it's almost a guide to to say these are the most interesting things we think are going on in the community this week, and go check them out.
Yeah, sort of using the same approach that we do with Compass, where our goal is to just kind of tell you what's going on in your community so you can be better informed. This is just, and of course that's what you do with Blank too, with the things you cover. So this is just another way for us to do that. Hopefully people will find it helpful, and as we said, we're kind of making it up as we go along. It will definitely evolve as we kind of figure out what works best for us, and also crucially what kind of feedback we get, what people want it to be. I'm pretty excited about it.
I am too, Jesse. And the thing is that we a lot of the people that will be contributing to it are people that we've mentioned already. So it's going to be a true partnership between both Compass and Blank. And I'm just really I'm honored to be a part of it. I love what you all do. I think it's incredibly necessary what you all do. So I'm very grateful to be a part of it. And I think we've talked about this a little bit. It's basically just us using the knowledge that we've gained from being in this town and the relationships that we have and we've made over the years, and just combining them so that we can help push the scene forward a little bit.
That's right. Absolutely.
So
yes,
I think it's a good thing.
We do hope this is something that, again, we want it to attract some advertising and
Absolutely.
sponsors. We want it to be worth our while, but I think all of us share really the mission that this is something we want.
Yeah.
We want to have this, and so we're going to make it for ourselves as much as for anybody else.
It's kind of like the Appalachian Bike Club with the urban wilderness.
Right.
I mean, the genesis of the urban wilderness was these guys wanted a good place where they could go ride their bikes.
Right.
Exactly. So they went and built it.
So they went and built it, and look at what we have.
It's
and
great.
It's kind of a similar thing. This is something that we think we miss.
Yeah,
for one thing, from Metropulse days.
Sure.
And that we think would be, great for the city.
Yep.
And it's one of the things that grown-up cities have.
Absolutely. and we are. I mean, people sometimes I think forget how big Knoxville actually is now. I mean, Knox County has almost 500,000 people in it, and there are a whole lot of things to do here. Like every weekend, week in and week out, there's lots of stuff happening in and around. And we're mostly going to focus on Knoxville and Knox County, but we're certainly going to include places like the Shed in Blount County.
Absolutely.
And, if there are really interesting things happening in Oak Ridge,
Sure.
Things like the Louie Bluey Festival, which happens well out of town, but I think is a significant local event.
Yes.
We're going to include all of those too.
Yeah, it's going to be loose and open. I'm glad you mentioned that. It's the radius of it is. It's just going to be whatever we think makes sense. I think and what the readers think makes sense. So and we've already had a few folks reach out talking to us about the potential of advertising, and so it seems to me like it's going to, I don't know, it seems to me like it's gone really well so far. Now we've got to get one done and get it out there and see what happens, right?
The pre-launch has gone great.
We could be back here next week saying, well, sorry about that.
Yeah, I might just have a head only like outside of this interview.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's great, and thank you all for having me on today.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I've had a good time floating around here, and it's I think people can look forward to it, and I don't think we're going to let anybody down on it.
All right. Well, Seth, why don't we go ahead and take a break and let Rusty's head float on out of here. All right. Well, thanks again to Rusty for dropping by, and definitely we are excited about the Knoxville Mix, and we hope you all will check it out as well and give us feedback and your thoughts on it. We are now to the question and answer, the Q&A part of the podcast. Every week we invite readers on our subscriber-only Facebook page, the Compass Colloquy, one of the many amenities for Compass subscribers, and you can find subscription information at CompassKnox.com. We ask our readers if there are any odds and ends, topics, subjects they want to hear about on the podcast, and we did get a question this week about the status of the Fort Kidd Playground there on Hall of Fame Drive. What's going on with Fort Kidd?
Fort Kidd is getting ready to reopen. Of course, Fort Kidd is, playground. It's the most talked about playground in Knoxville. It was built mostly with volunteer labor and
I should
money.
jump in and say I said Hall of Fame Drive. I meant World's Fair.
I was
Yeah.
gonna mention that it was not actually Hall of Fame Drive.
Right, over across from the art museum.
Across from the art museum, but it was a community led effort to build it. It's built out of timbers. It was a great place for kids to go and play. I took my daughter there. You've taken your kids there. If you're listening to this and you have kids, you've had kids over the last 30 years, you probably took your kid there. But it was deteriorating. It was real. I mean, there's a retaining wall that was between it and
World's Fair
Park Drive. Thanks. You put that worm in my head.
Sorry about
anyway, the retaining wall was buckling. It wasn't sustainable. It was also not ADA compliant anymore. And so what the city did was decide to replace it, which brought its own controversies out. A lot of people didn't want them to replace it, but they wanted to refurbish it perhaps, but not replace it. But they were going to replace it anyway. They needed to get it back into ADA compliance, and so what they've been doing over the past few months is working on the site, working on that slope where the retaining wall kept back the embankment, turned it into a slope. They're going to be putting in play equipment, and sometime in the next 4 weeks, they're going to do what the city communications director, Kristen Farley, told me was a soft opening, where they're going to have it opened, and they're not going to make a big deal out of it. It's just one day, apparently, you're going to be able to go there with your kids, and they're going to be able to play. But they're going to have kind of a soft opening, let kids go play there. And then sometime later in the spring, when it gets a little warmer, and the weather has a lot to do with all of this, when it gets a little warmer, there's going to be a community event. They're going to have an official ribbon cutting and also so Fort Kidd, by sometime this spring and next summer, certainly will be a place where kids can go and play, make new memories.
It will not be like the old Fort Kidd. And
No.
I think the thing that a lot of people were very attached to about that was those big wooden structures, which really came out of, that was built in the early 90s. And so that was really toward the tail end of when people were building those big wooden kind of jungle gym type structures that, I know I grew up playing on some of those in the 1970s. But over time, those fell out of favor with playground designers because they're hard to maintain. They tend to fall apart. You get splinters. There's various kinds of issues there. And so I imagine that this new play equipment is going to be more like the kind of composites, plastics, metals, and so forth that we see on modern playgrounds, as opposed to, which was really what gave it that Fort Kidd name and feel, was that it was a huge wooden structure.
Yeah, it was unique for a public city playground to be like that, and I don't know how much of that flavor will be recaptured, if any. So it may end up not being as popular as the original Fort Kid, but there will be a space there. It's still going to be at a lovely location across from the museum, with a nice view of downtown, and so it's still going to have some attractions, I think.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, looking ahead to this coming week, we do have our public bodies getting back into business and operation here for the new year. Knox County School Board will have its work session and monthly voting meeting. One thing to keep in mind if you are the kind of person who likes to attend or watch school board meetings, the school board has changed their meeting date. They are still going to have their monthly work session typically the first Monday of every month. This week they're into the second week because they wanted to get away from the New Year's holiday. But the voting meetings will now be that Thursday rather than the Wednesday that they have been on. The board made this change last year, just kind of feeling like they wanted to give a little more breathing room between the work session and the voting meeting, just another extra day there in case there was anything that needed to be worked on or finessed coming out of the work session. Also, of course, on Wednesdays, we do still have a lot of churches have services on Wednesdays, and so they wanted to pick a day where there weren't typically other kinds of conflicts. Not a super exciting looking school board agenda. They are going to be talking about their legislative priorities for the coming year because, of course, the legislature is coming into session this coming week, and we will be writing about that a little bit this coming week as well. And also they are going to, they hope, finalize the purchase of some property in Farragut for a new elementary school there. So those will be talked about, and we will certainly be writing about them. And then the following day, on Tuesday, City Council meets.
City Council will meet on Tuesday, and it's even money as to whether the meeting ends on Tuesday night or Wednesday morning.
Oh, no.
It's a long agenda, and there are a lot of kind of lot of issues on there that will generate a lot of discussion. So it's a very long agenda. They only had one meeting last month, so there's it's
they're kind of backed up.
They're backed up, and so Tuesday will be fun. One of the things that will generate a lot, if not most, of the discussion is that I kind of like to call them dueling dog ordinances, although they're actually animal control ordinances. They're the council is going to be revising the animal control ordinance. They're both kind of both of the proposals are very similar. They're going to be regulating the how you transport animals and caring for animals. One of the things they're put in is a restriction on how many animals you can have. Both of them say that if you're not a business or a zoo or something, you capped at 4 dogs and cats.
4 total animals.
Yeah.
Not 4 dogs and 4 cats.
You can have 2 dogs, 2 cats. You can have 3 cats, 1 dog. You can have 4 dogs or 4 cats. You cannot have more than 4 combined. So
that sounds like a difficult law to enforce.
Well, I'm sure it will be a difficult law to enforce. It's probably one of those that if there's be complaint driven,
Mm-hmm.
if your neighbor complains that your 4 dogs are barking all the time and your 3 cats are running and using their garden as a litter box, then they'll come out and look. But if you have, my guess is that your knowledge of general law is, if you have 5 cats in your house, they're not going to come, knocking on your door.
It's not going to be a Sophie's Choice situation.
Show us your cats.
Right.
But anyway, that's not the big bone of contention. It's in both of them. Where they diverge, in particular, is about tethering dogs outside. And there's one of the proposals is from the Animal Control Board, and Councilwoman Janet Testerman, who we talked about earlier, who is on the board, but she's also the executive director of the Young Williams Animal Center, and it sets out all these regulations about how you can tether your dog outside. One of the things that it calls for that's kind of a safety thing is that you would have to have these pulley lines to allow the dog to go to run a little bit.
Not just tied to a
Not just
stake, basically.
If you tied to a stake is out, and you would be required to do that. And there are other common sense things like it'd have to be within reach of water, shade, and not just a doghouse, but shade, things like that. But the other proposal, which already has the support of a majority of council members, would go further in one way. You can still have the stake out there. The pulley line would be optional, but what's mandatory is that an adult human has to be outside with the animal.
Huh.
And I'm sure there are lots of people who would say, well, that kind of defeats the purpose of being able to
Tie up your dog.
tie up your dog, because you tie up your dog so you can clean your house. Tie up your dog, so it can be outside while you go to the store or whatever. And these are dogs that are outside of a fenced area.
Right.
You can keep your dog in a fenced area. You don't have to do anything to it. But that requirement that a human has to be there is it's already got the support of, like I said, a majority of 5 of the council members. Interesting thing about the order that they're going to be taken in, the animal control version is the first one that they're going to consider, and so they would have to vote it down if they want to pass theirs. But we will see that when they talked about this before at a work session, it went on for a very, very long time. There's a significant amount of debate. I don't know if there will be this time, but my experience shows that anytime there's an ordinance or a resolution on an agenda that has to do with your pets, it gets a lot of attention from the public.
People take these things very personally because lots of us are very attached to our our pets.
Your pet is part of your family.
Yep.
So it's not just an ornament in your house. It's part of your family. So,
right.
That's one thing that's up there. I've even had to consult with my notes. There's so many things going on. There are a couple of payment in lieu of tax agreements that are going to be up. One of them is for that massive core civic development along Cumberland Avenue that we've talked about, where they're going to come in. It's 4 buildings, more than 800 residential units, 30,000 square feet of commercial space. There where the area where the block where Stefano's used to be, and University Liquors, that block, and then but anyway, there'll be 4 huge buildings. Everything's already been approved for that, but they're wanting a tax break. Where payment in lieu of tax deals, basically where your property taxes are frozen for a period of time. This is a short-term pilot agreement. It only lasts 5 years. Most of them are 10 to 15, even longer duration, but it's only going to be 5 years. But the total investment there's $530 million.
Wow.
So it's a
big project.
It is a big project, and so after the construction period is over, then for 5 years their property taxes will be frozen at current levels, and then they'll resume paying the full bill after that.
And I believe that 5-year period is the same one that was granted to that big, also student housing complex on White Avenue, just kind of up the hill there, which was, I don't remember, 6 or 7 years ago. But I think that probably the shorter duration for those reflects the fact that that is a high demand area.
Right.
And so it's harder for developers to make the case that, there's market forces we have to overcome or whatever, because there's already obviously a very strong market down there for that.
There is a strong market. One of the interesting things is they always do, the city always does what's called a but-for test. They get a third party to come in, take a look at it, and see, and to see, how, what basically, one of the things it does is it takes a look at, okay, if there's no government incentive, what's the profit margin going to be? And if there is a government incentive, what is the profit margin going to be? And the thing is, they try to get it in kind of the range of that's common in the industry. It's usually around, I think it's 12% for this particular type of
That's
development.
considered a reasonable return.
It's a reasonable return, and so the goal is to get it to be a reasonable return, because they can't get their other financing if they can't show a reasonable return. And that's the whole point of this, is to enable them to get the other financing to be able to build it. So what this would do is, if I remember the numbers correctly, and I believe I will because I looked at them this morning, without a government incentive, the profit margin would be 9.1%. Even with the pilot, it's only going to be 9.9%.
It's just a little.
It's a little boost. Evidently enough for them to get their financing, but it's still below, so it's not like it doesn't appear to be a giveaway to make the development extravagantly, obscenely profitable. It's going to be on the low end of what a real estate developer looks for. The other pilot is going to be a little bit longer. It's going to be 9 years. It's going to be I believe it's 9 years. 9 years. I was right about that. Who knows? It's going to be up on Hill Avenue, right by the old Hyatt Regency there, across from where the Science Museum property is. But there's going to be an apartment building go in there, and they're asking for their 9-year pilot as well. It's a lot more modest investments, $59 million, but hey, nothing to sneeze at. But it will bring hundreds more residents in to this downtown area as well. So,
and those are market rate apartments?
Not all of them. They are going to have workforce housing. I believe it's 19 workforce housing units that will be rented out at basically 80% of the market rate. And for those who aren't familiar with the term workforce housing, that's housing that working people who are struggling, that would struggle to get market rate housing can afford. And so it's but they're going to have 19 units of workforce housing there.
All right.
And then let's see, the one other thing they're doing lots of other things too. This is just a sampling, but they're going to be accepting, voting whether to accept donations from Visit Knoxville, the Tennessee Department of Tourism, and the Downtown Knoxville Alliance for the work that's being done at Cradle of Country Music Park, where the big sculpture we've talked about is going to be going in. So it's more than $200,000 in separate gifts, but that's going to go toward that project. So.
All right. Well, and then Planning Commission meets on Thursday, right?
Planning Commission meets on Thursday. They're going to have the most of the agenda is taken up with routine rezonings. There is one interesting kind of thing, and it's interesting because it kind of highlights the discussions that are going on with Advanced Knox, and that this is in the county, and it's at the it's a property they're asking me to rezone to. It's already commercial, but to a heavier commercial and light industrial zone, and this area is surrounded pretty much by single family housing, but it's also real close to the intersection of Dry Gap Pike and Beaver Creek Road. So, and there's a little commercial nodule there, and this idea that's one of the ones that's going through the advanced Knox process is building up intersection commercial nodes like that, and trying to keep development there. And it's it is going to have a little bit of opposition, not as much as if they were taking residential land and doing this, but it's just an example of the issues that are coming to light in the county, where you have these businesses that want to go in. Where should businesses locate on? Would it be better? I mean, and the question is, would it be better if it was located further down Dry Gap Pike, or further down Beaver Creek Road, or closer to this intersection, where that's how these are questions that are coming up all over Knox County, especially North and East Knox County.
Yep.
So, but anyway, that's one of the things that's going to be there. Like I said, there were lots of rezoning requests and all that good stuff.
All right. Well, all of that and anything else interesting, we will be back here next week to talk about. In the meantime, if you have not yet signed up for free for the Knoxville Mix, you can find that again at blanknews.com. And I guess that does it for this week. Our show's produced by Lord Seth Barber for Barbarian Productions.
Thank you,
Our
Seth.
theme music is by Will Wright, and we will see you all next week.
Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. Your hosts today are Scott Barker and Jesse Mayshark, the founders of CompassKnox.com. You can find their daily in-depth coverage and subscribe at CompassKnox.com. The Compass Point podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Almost an Agreement. Almost an Agreement is a layman's attempt to get a handle on the workings in government and politics that we deal with every day. Check them out at almostanagreement.com or subscribe for free on your favorite podcast provider. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And many thanks to William Wright for composing our theme song. Compass Points is a partnership of Barking Shark Media and Barbarian Productions, and recorded by Lord Seth A. Barber at Barbarian Studios, Knoxville, Tennessee.